So I just wanted to say thank you and appreciate the opportunity to present my approach for the fiscal 24 budget this year. Just as a side note, as per the city charter, it is a requirement of the city manager to propose the budget. And while this is not a full presentation of the budget, this is a glimpse of the methodology that I'm using, and based on the conditions and the environmental factors that exist, which was what I'm taking a look as far as the budget is concerned, preparation. So if you'll remember back in March, council and the executive leadership team attended a retreat where we worked on 2 days creating a new vision and core values for the city. And up there you'll see uncompromised excellence, which is circled, and that's going to be something that's carried through this presentation. When I look at all of the factors that go into the budget this year and the challenges that we're facing at the city level, I just want everybody to keep in the back of their mind that the focus for the budget is going to be on uncompromised excellence. So I purposely made this an eye chart so you would sit there and look at that very handsome police officer that's up there in the right-hand corner, but there's something that I wanted to draw to your attention, is that the city's top priority is to maintain existing service levels in all divisions and departments. So when we create our budget, we look at that as to maintaining those service levels and the amenities of the city that we provide. We provide those amenities to all 38,000 residents of the city and anybody that comes in the city that takes advantage of our restaurants and our patronage for retail, so on and so forth. So the city's primary objective is to provide a standard budgetary performance for the staff and council, which is endorsed, and to move forward for continuity to reinforce the city's core financials and preserving that for successive staff and council. We do this by creating a baseline service level. And what I mean by baseline service level is that we identify a revenue source to a cost value for the city. So if we take on a new initiative, we typically would identify a certain revenue source to pay for that. Any deviation from that, if an unfunded mandate or a cost comes in that we don't have, we would then go back to the budget and look for areas in the budget in which we would need to make those changes. So you've heard me say this a couple of times in our meetings. There are 3 areas of sustainability that I look at from a governance or city manager's perspective. One of those is financial sustainability, the other is operational sustainability, and the last one is environmental sustainability. We're going to touch on all of those. But what I wanted to draw your attention to is this chart here that's showing that the cost of all items, and I put food in there as well because that's also going up, so anybody that knows has gone to the grocery store has seen the food increase and the prices going up. But key under the financial sustainability word is that Peachtree City is not immune to those inflationary costs either. So as you will notice over the last several months that I've been here, the majority of contracts that have come in front of council have had significant cost increases associated with them. One of the other examples on here is we typically base our cost increases by what's called the CPI, or Consumer Price Index. Right now the CPI is at about 5.5%. So to give you an analogy of how that works, let's say, for example, I buy a piece of technology that has a 5-year lifespan on it. So the initial cost of that technology would be X, and then every year outgoing I would buy a maintenance contract that would keep that up to date. That maintenance contract would then theoretically be subject to a 5.5% cost increase every year for that service. However, that's just one aspect of technology, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. One of the main things I do want to talk about, though, is that we've seen some extremely high increases in a lot of the things that we're doing here as far as the city and the necessities that we use. So for example, we've seen about a 50% increase in paving. We've seen about a 50% increase in those costs associated with asphalt and concrete and a lot of that stuff. And I know that's being faced industry-wide. Like I said before, we brought contracts in front of you that showed that 50% increase. We've seen increases in our vehicle and equipment, our equipment that we use in public works and rec. We've seen increases in our fleet vehicles, and those have been up about 30%. The other interesting fact about this, whether you want to call it supply chain or we've been in supply chain fatigue for a really long time, is that a lot of these contracts we need to get in very early on. So for example, we need to get sometimes in as much as a year, almost 2 years in advance of taking delivery of that equipment, just because that's how long that waiting line is to get something prepared. So here's a good example of the cost increases. So on the left-hand side, and where the big circle is, you'll see that this contract came to us in December of 2021, and this is for a ton of asphalt. Back then, we were paying $66.45 a ton. If we flash forward 1 year to December of 22, that price has gone up to $85.75 a ton. That significant increase is about 29%. That does not include in any of the labor that's associated with it actually putting this down. If you add in the factor of the labor, that equates to about a 55% increase in the cost of just getting that down. So understand that moving forward with this, and a lot of the asphalt that we use is for paving our paths and for paving our roads. If we're not increasing the budgets in that area, that means that we have less paths that we pave and less roads that we take care of. So again, going forward, when we put the budget together, we're assuming the cost increases for these commodities. This is another interesting one. Our fire chief, I know he's not here this evening, but he attended a conference and they were talking about public safety construction costs. And this is something that I brought to you in briefings as well, and we talked about some of the things that we're dealing with. Over the last 3 years, we've seen about a 55% increase in the cost associated with public safety construction, and these are typically your hardened structures, so they're built a little bit more substantial than a regular house dwelling would be. And if you compound that number over 3 years, that's about a 65.5% increase in the construction costs that are associated with that. So for example, we discussed back in 2022, before I got here, staff brought in front of council the construction of Fire Station 86, which is up at the Everton area. So that's a brand new piece of property. There's no fire station that exists. Back in 2022, the estimated cost of that fire station was $4.1 million, and we had divided that up amongst other funding sources like ARPA and some impact fees and things along those lines. We're not quite yet finished with architectural and engineering design on that fire station, but that price is slowly approaching $6 million at this point. So it is pricing itself out of being feasible. And actually, we have gone and scaled that building down from having admin offices for our fire administration folks to just making it a response and support location. So, you know, these are the things that we're faced with. In addition to that, I wanted to bring up, we went back in 2021, staff brought in front of you cost estimate for a building addition on the back of the police department for some additional storage and some different additional office. Back then, that price in 2021 was estimated at $1.9 million. Currently, that price, as it going through architectural and engineering design, is coming in at about $3.5 million for that cost of construction, going back and looking at this increase. In addition to that, that does not include a $500,000 spend for a generator that would take care of that entire building in a power outage. And currently at that location, the generator that exists is not at capacity to power the entire public safety building as we sit right now. I mentioned earlier technology costs. This is also pretty significant. This year, we're realizing the cost of moving to Office 365, which is a cloud-based solution, and our email in a cloud-based solution. So typically, and I have a pretty extensive background in technology, so I can speak to this until the cows come home, but I promise I'll be short. The idea behind technology now is most of your large software providers are going to what's called a subscription-based service, where they're moving you to a cloud environment. Microsoft is one of those, Adobe is one of those, to name a few. So typically when you would, prior to this move, you would buy a license, you would have that license exist on this piece of equipment. Now that license cost is a yearly license cost to maintain your connectivity to the cloud environment. Additionally, we're seeing increase in all of our technology across the board. So you can see we had about a 30% increase that we're estimating for fiscal year 2024. The last section up here under cybercrime, I do want to bring some attention to, because that is a very ongoing and very critical area of protecting all of the data that exists in the city. So cybersecurity, we use many layers of cybersecurity technology here to provide confidentiality and integrity and availability of our data. And in doing so, each one of those requires a maintenance contract associated, and every year the costs increase with that technology. Just as a side note, from a cybercrime perspective, as a little tidbit of information, from the beginning of the year, there have been 33 local governments in the US that have been hit by ransomware, and 20 of those governments have had their data stolen. So I just want to understand the magnitude of that the recovery process alone of getting back from a cyber incident is typically in the millions of dollars. But the other challenge of doing that is if your personally identifiable information or your customer information is taken, then there's a duty to respond by the entity in which that data was taken, and you have to typically provide some identity theft protection and notification, and there's a lot of other things that go along with that. So a lot of the things that we do from a cybercrime perspective are to put barriers in place to prevent that from happening. And with that, I'm going to turn it over so you get to hear another voice here. This is our Assistant City Manager, Justin Strickland.
Thank you, Bob. All right, so I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit to talk about funding sources. Primarily, we're going to be talking about millage rate, property taxes, et cetera, and then how that relates to the budget and what we're looking at for this year. First off, I want to start with, and I do want to give credit to Paul Salvatore, who's not here today. He's our finance director. He put together a lot of these slides that I'm going to do, and then we're going to get into the part I was originally going to do, but I wanted to give him credit for these. I did not do these slides. Paul did. So one of the theories that we've been using for the city for the past 20 years and is commonplace to use in the government sector is balancing your most stable revenue source, which is our property taxes, with your most critical expense area, which is our public safety, which is fire and police. So really what you're measuring here is how does your most stable funding source match up with your expenses of your most critical areas, which is fire and police. The reason we do this is because we can control the millage rate, not we as staff, but council can control the millage rate. We cannot control sales tax. We cannot control how much sales tax is being collected, what people are going and buying, but council can set the millage rate and control what we bring in as far as property taxes and how we're covering those needed expenses. And it's a pretty good benchmark for measuring those critical areas. So we're going to look at some charts here. We're going to look at some different scenarios. The first chart, what we're looking at is the past 10 years of, let me get my laser here. I got it. The green line here is our property tax revenue. The red line is our expenses of public safety, which is just police and fire, nothing else of expenses from the city. What the goal is for public safety expenses to be right on with that property tax collection, because then your most critical expenses are covered by your most stable revenue source. So you see here, these right at 2013, there was a gap in expenses up here and collections here. This was because we were coming out of the recession. We actually were still experiencing property tax value decline here. There was a 5% drop in 2013, and then it actually started growing. So this is 14 is when it actually started growing back again. You can see it stabilized. Our expenses were pretty stable throughout this time, and they pretty much stayed right on all the way up until 2021 or 22. In 22, council did do a full millage rollback. The rollback was 0.189 mills, and that's where we see kind of the divergence happen there, where our property tax revenues have now kind of gone off from our expenses with public safety. And the big jump here with expenses goes back to what Bob was presenting earlier of we are not immune to inflation. Just like as residents, as citizens, I'm a resident of Peachtree City, we're not immune to the stuff that we have to buy going up. The city's not immune to all of its expenditures going up as well. Oh, and I did want to go back. So, and in this scenario, so we're currently in 23. So for fiscal year 24, if council did decide to do a 0.01 reduction, this is kind of what the graph would show how the gap would be. So the gap is widening a little bit. This is the graph representation of that scenario. So you can see with the full rollback from 21 to 22, we were about $100,000 short on revenues over expenditures with taxes and public safety. We were hovering around that 100%. With the full rollback, we went down to 93.5% coverage. This year, we're at 92.1, and with a potential 0.1 mil rollback, we would be right at the 91 percentile there, or about $2 million short of covering just public safety. So, and then what is the impact of a 0.01 reduction? Based on the average home value, which is $446,000 right now in Peachtree City, that would save the average person about $17.83 for the year with a 0.1 mil reduction. So next scenario, I'm not going to review what the graph is again. It's the same graph, but the only difference is this is a 0.2 mil reduction. So you see it just kind of widens it just a little bit more. And then the graphical representation here it goes down to about 2.5, 2.6 million, or about 89, 90% coverage for a 0.2. And then for that same $446,000 house, you'd be looking at a savings of about $35.68 per homeowner. And I do want to caveat this, every home is different. So like, if it goes back and your house is not worth exactly $446,000, your savings would be different. And how the value of your house. So with Paul's calculations this year, talking with the tax assessor and the tax commissioner's office, based on the initial digest, the digest is not finalized for this year, so these numbers are not official or finalized, but what we are expecting is that a full rollback would be 0.577 mils. So to do a full rollback this year, it would require us to roll back 0.577 mils, and you see the revenue stays flat, which is what a rollback is. The slight increase there is just because of new growth, which is not part of the rollback. And then, but you see how big the gap starts to become there between public safety expenditures and property tax collections. So in that scenario of a full rollback, the gap becomes $4 million, and it takes us down to 84% funding of public safety from property taxes. And for that house of $446,000, it would save a property owner $102.93 per year. So another thing we wanted to just warn about, this is also Paul's slide and some research that he did. There are some indications out there that the housing market is starting to turn, and this is nationwide. This is a nationwide article. I think you read a few of them about how for the first time in 11 years, nationwide home sales have begun to decrease for the first time, and the reason we're not seeing that potentially yet in Fayette County is because current assessments in Fayette County are as of January 1. Say the value of your home is valued every January 1st. So if there is some impact to that here, we wouldn't see that until next year's assessments because the decline started in February. So worst case scenario, Paul kind of taking that information and then looking at if we did a full millage rollback this year, which is 2024, he actually went another year into 25. And if we did that full rollback in 24, and then the housing market declined by 5%, or the housing values declined by 5% like they did in 2013, this would be the gap that we start to see between property taxes and public safety. And then that's the worst, that's where it goes from 4 million next year and then potentially down to 6.87 million at 74% level funding there. All right, and so in this scenario, what we're looking at here is, we were pretty straight on here, 100% funded public safety to property taxes. We did a scenario with what would it actually take to get back to 100% of property taxes funding public safety. And it would actually be pretty much the exact opposite of a full rollback. It would be a roll up of 0.577 mils to get back to fully funded operations of public safety with property taxes. That does not mean staff is recommending a 0.577 mil increase. It just was, we just wanted to show what that would take because that would probably be a question somebody asked. Okay, so I'm going to shift into my slides now, which were the ones I actually did, but wanted to make sure y'all got that information. So my big question is, what does it cost to live in Peachtree City? What does it actually cost a resident to live here? And what do you get for that money that you're paying to the city in those property taxes? What I'm showing here is, this is the municipal maintenance and operations millage rate for every municipality in Fayette County that collects municipal taxes. Woolsey is a municipality in Fayette County, but they do not collect millage. They don't have a millage rate. They just collect county taxes, or they don't collect it. You just pay county taxes in Woolsey. You see Peachtree City here does have the highest millage rate of all the municipalities in Fayette County. Fayetteville second, then Tyrone, then Brooks. What I really want to highlight here is Peachtree City is the highest based on the municipal millage rates, but what are you actually getting in those cities for that? And is this accurate? What are you actually paying to live in these places? So I went in and I went into all the tax records and verified all this information, just FYI to everyone. But going in and actually adding in the municipal millage rates and the county millage rates, you'll see that the numbers start to change. Over here, if you just live in unincorporated Fayette County, you're paying your county maintenance and operations, you're paying your county fire district tax, you're paying your county EMS tax, and then you're paying your county E911 tax. So your county E911 is this purple sliver up here on each one. We actually do split that. Every single jurisdiction in Fayette County, we all split that cost, and the county runs it. But you'll notice that Peachtree City, we only pay municipal tax, the county M&O, and the E911. You get over to Tyrone, they pay for fire, and they pay for EMS, which we don't pay because we do that ourselves. You pay that in your Peachtree City here, whereas Tyrone pays it to the county. Fayetteville, same thing, a little different. They pay their municipal rate, they pay the county M&O, and then they pay the EMS rate, which the EMS rate is because they don't do EMS. They do fire, but they don't do EMS transport. So they do that to the county. And then Brooks, kind of the same thing as Tyrone. They pay their municipal, but then they do fire and EMS through the county. So when you actually look at the millage rates people are being charged for where you live, Peachtree City actually has a lower millage rate than Tyrone and Fayetteville to live in Peachtree City. So then I break that out. Peachtree City, where do your property taxes go? So a $446,000 property, like we were looking at earlier, the median kind of house value in Peachtree City. Your total taxes due last year, this is for 2022, $5,403.20. 66% of your taxes are going to the school board, right off the top. So of that $5,403, 2/3 of it's going to our schools. About 1/5 of it, 20%, is coming to Peachtree City, and then the rest of it's going to the county. All right, and then finally, if we go back to this bar chart here, I took this bar chart and then condensed it all into the stack bar chart. So you see, this is everything all together. This is your total tax bill for a $446,000 property if you lived in each one of these areas in Fayette County. So you'll see it's actually the most expensive to live in Tyrone if you have a $446,000 house, then Fayetteville, then Peachtree City, then Brooks, and Fayette County. And between all of them, no matter where you live in Fayette County, you're going to be paying about $500 within each other. Like if you live in unincorporated, you're paying about $500 less per year than if you lived right here in Peachtree City. So the big thing for me is, what do you actually get of the municipal millage rate that you're paying, and you actually are paying less to live here than in Tyrone per value of property than in Tyrone and Fayetteville? What do you get in Peachtree City that you would not get in those places? First thing is a premier fire and EMS service. Like we said, Tyrone and Fayetteville, especially Tyrone, they don't do fire or EMS. We do fire and EMS directly. So if you have a heart attack or a stroke or any kind of major medical incident, you want to have it in Peachtree City because we respond quickly, and we have EMS directly here in the city. We have an ISO 1 fire department. Tyrone and Fayetteville do not provide fire services. It's through the county. We have great parks and recreation areas. We have yearly events. We have the Fred, and we have a year-round aquatic center that these places don't have. There's not an aquatic center in Tyrone. There's not an aquatic center in Fayetteville. We maintain a year-round aquatic center. We have a premier public library. Our library, the Pine system, is 146 counties out of the 159 in Georgia, and our library has the second highest circulation in that system in the state. So our library moves books, and it moves digital media. Like, our library is a fantastic library. We have 100 miles of multi-use path. Tyrone and Fayetteville do not have that. They have some paths, but they do not have what we have with the 100-mile multi-use path, and that's paid for with the property taxes you pay to Peachtree City. We have the safest city to live in Georgia. We put it out there on social media multiple times. We are rated the best place to live in Georgia and the safest place to live in Georgia because of the fantastic police department we have, and that's paid for through your taxes. And then finally, we maintain a lot of the neighborhood signs, and I actually didn't know this when I got here, and it really surprised me. We maintain a lot of the neighborhood signs with tax money in the city, and all the media landscaping, everything we do here, that comes through that. So I think, and then beyond that, our staff, we have some of the best staff in Fayette County, if not the state, and we keep our equipment up, we keep all that cycled through like we should, and I think for kind of looking at what those millage rates are and what you get and the value in Peachtree City, at the end of the day when you're looking at your total property taxes, Peachtree City is a pretty awesome place to live, and we take that money and extend it and use that to keep this place one of the best places to be in Georgia. I'll pass it back over to Bob.
Thank you. We're like Laurel and Hardy, but you're probably
Yeah.
too young to remember who that is.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
I digress. So one of the areas that I was talking about earlier that we focus on environmental sustainability, and this is something that we look at, when we're talking about our planning and zoning, and we talk about, properties and our green spaces and the carts and paths and a lot of things that Justin was talking about a few seconds ago, protecting our green spaces. These are some things that that we continually do, and these are things that are going to be approaching us quickly here. So, Frank, raise your hand because this second item on here is Lake Peachtree dredging. Frank is very intimately familiar with that. So, at some point in the near future, we're going to get back into a situation where that lake needs to be dredged again because of the silt content that's in there. So, right now, that's an unknown cost, and that's an unknown variable on how we're going to pay for that. But nonetheless, that does come back to that environmental sustainability, because that is a drinking water source for the water that we get here through the county. We have efforts to clean up the city, the greenbelt, downed and damaged trees, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we go forward, because we've had a couple of tornadoes that have come through the city, and they've done some damage to certain areas. You'll all probably know that the boardwalk is currently closed because we have some dangerous trees that are there, and we're working on the mitigation of that. But nonetheless, we continue to deal with the downed trees. We need to look at the current building standards and engineering standards as we move forward, and there's a lot of opportunities there to take advantage of these LEED technologies, and a lot of that is currently built into the new building codes right now, but it can continue to improve, making your buildings more efficient, things along those lines as far as your HVAC and your heating is concerned. We look at the solid waste and recycling. I know that's a big topic here for the city, but we have a market system right now where we have multiple providers that you can choose from. Is that something that we wish to continue to do, or should we look for an overarching entity to take care of that for the city from that perspective? Understanding that there's a lot of things that go with that, but from a recycling perspective, just know that the commodities for recycling change almost daily. Sometimes that cardboard is really good, sometimes cardboard is not so good. So, there's typically a cost associated with that, and to level set those expectations as far as getting rid of that commodity. China's not buying it like they used to before, so therefore, that commodity can fluctuate in price. Emergency management, I touched on that a little bit ago. We've, the first 6 months I got here, I thought I moved from the hurricane capital of the world to the tornado capital of the world. We had multiple tornadoes that hopped over Peachtree City, causing some damage. I fielded multiple conversations from residents in regards to the railroad system that goes through here, and we've seen those in the news, the railway accidents and the chemicals that go through the city and go through those other areas. So from an emergency management perspective, that is on my radar to make sure that we have the capabilities. And we do have a first-class fire department to respond to that, but nonetheless, we still need to make sure that we're putting protective measures and we're protecting our residents from those types of those issues. And then we need to look to partner with our major partners that are here, such as Georgia Power, when it comes to electric car chargers, electric golf cart chargers at our facilities, and making those amenities available to the city. So then we talk about, and I'm sure council has heard me say this before, I know staff has, so I apologize for being repetitive. I always say, can we afford to own what we currently own? And I mean that by the facilities and by the amenities that the city has. So to give you an example, we have 74 city buildings to maintain with about 500,000 square feet of space. We have 29 tunnels, 36 bridges for pass, and 12 roadway bridges. So that all comes out of that those taxes, and paying for those repairs and maintenance on your taxes come from that aspect. So some of the things that we look at from an operational sustainability perspective, and some of the critical areas that I'm looking at right now as far as facilities are concerned, I have 2 roofs that need to be replaced at City Hall and Kedron at about $900,000 apiece. I'm looking at a price increase from $1.9 million to $3.7 million for an expansion on the back of the police department, as mentioned earlier, and a generator to function that building. We just got a price quote for Drake Field. Everybody knows where that's at, but when it rains, what happens to that field? It's very slushy and muddy, and the mitigation aspect of fixing that field is about $500,000 to get that to where it drains appropriately so we can use that field year-round. We have a pool bubble that has reached its life expectancy. We talked about having a year-round pool, but at some point that pool bubble is going to need to be replaced, and all of the equipment that keeps that supported, it has reached its life expectancy. We got a quote about 2 years ago for $1.5 million, and as cost increases, you can factor in at least another 65% plus on top of that to replace the bubble. We're sitting on about $1.9 million of lights replacement at the Mead Youth Fields. I have some pictures in here that I'll show you later, but just understand that that field and that lighting system has reached its usable life, and the parts that are available for that are just not made anymore. So we've pieced it and parted it together for as long as we can, but at some point, in order to maintain operation of those fields in the evening, we're going to need to do something with the lights. I talked about the boardwalk issue. So we had the tornado came through, knocked a tree down on the boardwalk, did some damage. We fixed the damage on the boardwalk. However, as we went through and did some more investigation, we found out that there are 25 or 30 dangerous trees that are leaning and hanging that are causing an additional risk for anybody that's partaking that boardwalk. So we had to close it down for safety reasons. That's a wetlands area, so to get in there and actually mitigate those trees and not just cut them down is about a $200,000 expense for us to go in there and actually take care of that. And in the back, there's actually a felled tree that has done some more damage to the boardwalk that we're going to have to repair. We have a building here that's in the City Hall that it has no elevator in it. It's 2 floors. The elevator replacement cost for that to put an elevator in here is $250,000. We have about $100,000 for the pressure cleaning and sealing of City Hall. We have about $350,000 for the replacement of the Field of Hope. We have $325,000 for an HVAC system for the library. The list goes on and on as far as the items that are in the maintenance aspect that are some reaching critical mass to the point where we have to respond to those to get them operational from a facilities perspective. One of the key things for me is the aesthetics of the city. Looking at our curbs and medians and signs, our sidewalks, the City Hall property, the facades of our buildings, the signage, the landscaping, so on and so forth. These are ongoing maintenance issues, but we have been behind for many years on a lot of these things, and the catch-up process sometimes is worse than actually sitting and watching things deteriorate. From an operational sustainability perspective, things that we're looking at, we have traffic issues in the city. I know everybody is surprised about that. We have some plans in the works for roundabouts and for hawk signals, which are the lighting mechanisms that allow golf carts to cross at grade paths. Flashing stop signs. I'm dealing with some internal staffing issues as far as having, critical mass in some of my critical departments based on COVID. So COVID came through and there was a reduction in force that was done. We lost about 24 people through a reduction in force in COVID in some critical areas. And through that process till I got here from when COVID happened, we've only regained about 10 or 11 of those people. And so I have critical departments in the city that are very low on staff, which causes delays in processing things, delays in hiring people. I have shortages in human resources. I have shortages in planning and zoning and city engineering and those areas in which the public actually interfaces with us and needs something turned around rather quickly. And I'm put in a position to have to pull people out of other departments to kind of fill in, thus creating that continued process. We're looking at the ability to manage and direct current projects. So we have a lot of projects that are going on in the city. In addition to 40 new projects that came on with SPLOST. SPLOST has been a great thing for the city to provide a lot of opportunities for us to take advantage of new facilities, new fire trucks, and things along those lines. But the operational aspects of those are something that we have to assume from a city perspective because the buildings still need to be maintained, the fire trucks still need to be maintained, so on and so forth. and then working on a project portfolio with a prioritization that I and council will need to work on to make sure that we're identifying those critical areas to continue the city moving in the right direction. So let's take a look at some of the things that we have done so far from that uncompromised excellence that I started out this PowerPoint presentation with. Back in April of this year, we passed a significant employee benefits and compensation package that benefited about 70% of that to our public safety, which is fantastic. That put us in the 85th percentile and made us more marketable when it comes to getting the quality and qualified candidates to apply for positions in the city and start filling some of those critical roles in our public safety. It also paid dividends back to our staff and our ability to retain the employees that we currently have and to continue to give them opportunity to advance through that process. We've gotten some repetitive services moved around with that cleanup process. So for grounds had moved from recreation into public works where they're better served. And a pride and joy of mine is an increased public communications output. You have probably noticed that we have really increased our ability to reach the public through our social media channels and getting out in front of there. This presentation is a testament to their amazing work. In the last 6 months that I have been here, I have seen nothing but amazing things coming from 3 people in that organization who are doing all this work. So thank you goes out to them for all of that, along with identifying capital needs for the city. So let's take a look at some of these projects that we worked on. This is a replacement of the Riley Field and Track. This project is $435,000. This is the All Children's Playground. The price tag on All Children's Playground was $620,000. We did some resurfacing at the Pebble Pocket tennis courts, about $60,000 worth of work. And this is something that we need to do and keep up with every 5 to 6 years in order to maintain the integrity of those courts. We also done some new paving. This is at Glenlock, the parking lot. That was about a $91,000 project. This is a continued effort with our path paving, approximately $3.2 million a year or 8.38 miles of path on an average from 2017 to 2022. And we have about an average of $382,000 per mile of paving that the city actually does. So these are all of city employees that are doing this work. We got a new fire engine, engine 82. Council helped push this, although the engine I think did a lot of the work, but we did push this into the fire station. So this goes back to the testament Justin was talking about the amenities in the city of Peachtree City. We have the benefit of having this great equipment to take care of the residents here. We just recently went to council for a new coating on the hockey rink roof. That was an $83,000 project. I don't know how many folks actually have taken advantage of our disc golf that's next to City Hall here, but we did an upgrade to that. It has been overwhelmingly popular and continues to be. We're actually renting discs for individuals that would like to play out of the library system. So if you have a library card, please go over there and get a disc so you can continue to play. But this is a brand new course that we built thanks to our rec department and Kathy sitting over here in the audience. This was a $25,000 project. You'll start seeing some signs popping up. This is a new sign design for us as we start updating the amenities and keeping the consistency of signs through the city. We did some work at the Fred. Again, these are testament to the things that Justin was talking about. So we updated the lawn seating at the Fred. Going back to that conversation about our amazing public communications, we won 3 Telly Awards recently for our ability to communicate. So and can communicate very well with our residents. So we won a Telly Award for our What is Splost video, we won a Telly Award for our Dear Santa, and we won a Telly Award for Mondays with the Mayors. And we're going to continue to do that, and these are huge accolades for a communications department to be able to aspire to. So with every good, there's always a downside. So let's take a look at some of the things that we need to continue to do in order to maintain the integrity of Peachtree City. So one of those primary things is to identify a capital asset management system and to get all of our 74 buildings and all of our recs and all of our facilities into a program that is continued to tell me on a yearly basis how much money I need to spend or request in order to keep our facilities up to date. Same rules apply for our fleet maintenance program. We're going to increase our citizen engagement. We need to utilize some new committees and advisory groups, and that's reaching out to our citizens and having you help us make some decisions in some critical areas, such as paths, such as rec and events and things along those lines. So there's going to be a lot of these things and opportunities rolling out for our citizens. I talked about the project portfolio and that operational aspect, and right now we're out on the street for a request for proposal for a recreation master plan that is going to take a look at all of the recreation and events in the city, and is going to help us make some long-term decisions as far as those benefits and amenities that we have. So I just want to call your attention to that top right corner. I'm pretty sure that Mr. Cowell over there took my picture when I first got here under a sign that looked very similar to this. This is what the front of City Hall looks like. It may have been that picture, Cal. This is a facility inside the tennis center. So there's a roof issue at that location, and that water has caused significant amount of damage to us not actually be able to occupy that location at tennis center. This is an office. There was a water leak that was coming through the ground at the tennis center location, and this is an actual office space that exists there. This is the football building that's adjacent to that beautiful Riley track operation that we just saw. So we're spent a lot of money to put that track together, and the next iteration of that is going to be doing the striping, but when you pull into that parking lot, that's what you're going to be parking next to. This is inside that fire station where we push that brand new fire truck in. So this is the conditions in which our firefighters are currently working and living. This is the insulation in the roof and in the walls. This is inside the bay of that fire station, and you'll notice a firefighter's turnout gear is in there. So there's new requirements that are associated with fire service as it comes to off-gassing and carcinogens from that equipment, and typically that equipment is washed and laundered regularly to get all of those chemicals out of it. But unfortunately, any of that clean equipment is put back in that room, and that right next to it is a truck that would start up with a diesel engine, and then off-gas diesel fumes back into that equipment. This is some of our landscaping conditions at our parks amenities. This is what some of the fences look like that are around our ballparks. This is a seating area just outside that. These are the bleachers that are next to that. So you sit, this is where you would sit to watch your kids play. Again, this is the mulch area under the bleachers. That's the lighting box that I was mentioning at Meade Field. So the equipment that's in that lighting box is antiquated, and basically right now we're scrambling to find parts to keep that up and operational. About a $2 million project that exists right there. This is the driveway into Meade Field. Anybody that's gone down there, that's a dirt road, and this is after a rainy day, and that continued flooding causes a washout of those mulch areas. And then it creates that fast-moving creek of water that finds its own path, but then ultimately that washes into those landscape areas. Again, another fencing issue. This picture on the right is you know, our temporary fix for running out of space at the fire station. So in that room right there, we've had to put up temporary structures in order to, you know, house additional equipment and gear for our firefighters. And our medians. This is some of our playground equipment. These are the pictures from the boardwalk and the damage that happened to the boardwalk. This is a city sign that needs to be obviously refurbished, and then the picture on the right is I'll say this for Hannah, she's not here, but this is an egregious gap at the Rubicon tot lot. So that's actually worn and weathered away underneath the tot lot. Just some more conditions of the medians and our, these are inside our parks, our pathway tunnels. This is at the Field of Hope. So this is an ADA accessible baseball field, and as you can see there, that field itself is a turf field, and what's happening here is the seams are actually pulling apart on that field that are going to need to be repaired. This is the pool bubble that I talked about. So again, the pool bubble is at its end of life expectancy, and the equipment that's used to keep that inflated, not including about a week in advance of this being put up and a week after it being taken down, requires both Public Works and Park and Recreation staff to actually assemble this, put it up, take it down, and then store it. But the condition of that pool bubble is in disrepair, and it's going to need to be replaced very near future. So I'd just like to give a quick recap of where we're going to be going next. We have a budget calendar in front of us here. So we have a council workshop to review the city manager's proposed budget on June 20th, which is a Tuesday. On Thursday, June 13th, we're going to have a public hearing on the proposed budget and the capital improvement program at a regular council meeting, and that's on Thursday. And then we'll have an adoption of the operating budget and the capital improvement plan Thursday, August the 3rd. And Mayor and Council staff is here for any questions or comments that you may have.
Start, Frank?
I would just tell you that after as many years in the Air Force as a civil engineer, the maintenance plan has been a big concern of mine. I've talked to you, I think, almost since the first day I met you. You know, trying to keep the city and its facilities up to standards is very, very difficult. And you have identified these almost from the beginning as you've drawn through the city, and I commend you for doing that, because it's going to be a very, very difficult. We're just not going to have the money to do everything. And not only do we do everything, but then you add all the SPLOST projects to it, and it's just a continuous program of trying to maintain everything we own and to keep it up to the Peachtree City standards that all of us expect. So you got a challenge ahead of you, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
All I can say to you, Bob, is that it was an excellent presentation. It made me wince many times as I saw some of those pictures up there. You have a Herculean task in front of you, and I think that I'm glad we have you to do this. We need that kind of leadership, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. I have an amazing staff, so I can't do it all by myself. So the testament
But
to
it
my
does
people.
require the good leader.
Thank you.
So, all the pictures we saw, I encourage anybody out here and tell all your friends, pick a park, pick any park. Go out there and take a good look at it. And you'll be surprised, and I want to say disappointed in how it looks. And we've let things over the years creep up on us and creep up on us and creep up on us. And we address them, which I know you guys did a facilities bond and got a lot of them, but that maintenance just keeps coming and coming. And I think as a city, I think we want to be a first-class kind of city, not a oh wow, it's run down. I look at it like, I look at the city, I hate to say, like my garage, you know, like, I'll put this here. Next thing you know, it's piled up, and it's almost overwhelming. And I appreciate you looking at the fact that we need to come up with a maintenance plan throughout the city, and that we're going to get on the road. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, if I could, I would go back to the financial side of this thing, and we hear every day on whether you're looking at Mr. Beverly's newspaper or online newspaper or social media, that there's folks out there that's screaming and hollering, you got a 50% reserve and you need to cut taxes, you need to cut taxes. Well, we just saw what would happen if we start reducing this thing. And the last part of that that Bob showed was $4.2 million. And you know, the year before that, it was like $3 million, and then $2 million before that. And sooner or later, if you cut that, or you start cutting your property taxes that we have control over, we have nothing. because now we will be down below that 30% or whatever it is before the state takes over. And we've got cash on hand, and we can pay for a lot of stuff. And we're in a lot better shape than those last slides showed. But we have a lot of work to do, and we have some very hard decisions to make. And, and it's gonna cost some money to do that.
I think at the end of the day, that this budget should reflect who we want to be as a city. You know, do we take pride when we look around at our facilities and our buildings? And I think we have, obviously, Bob's come in with new set of eyes and 30 years of experience, and I think it looks like he's been here a lot longer than 6 months, but after only 6 months, I suddenly feel like we might have a new lease on life here, that we can really start turning things around, and I'm very excited about that. You know, all the things that we saw, we still haven't even talked about. Last year, when we did the SPLOST conversation, we talked about Battery Way Park. You know, it was important to our citizens to know that we were gonna upgrade that park, and, you know, we don't see big capital improvements here. We see what's necessary in order to run our city. Also, if we put off any necessary expenditures now, we're gonna pay a whole lot more later. I think that's something important to keep in mind. So we'll have to keep our eyes on the prize, uncompromised excellence, if that's really what we want, and that is what we all decided as an executive leadership team, then I think we're gonna have to keep that in mind when we approve a budget here in the next few weeks.